Welcome back, everyone. Today I talked to Danny Scott. He's the CEO of UK Bitcoin exchange CoinCorner. We talk about the early days setting up multiple Bitcoin businesses and the problems that go along with it. We talked about banking, regulations, and his contributions to Bitcoin Core. When I talk to people who have been involved as long as someone like Danny, it makes me think for a split second, oh God, I wish I was involved back then. I wish I'd have bought Bitcoin. You know, we've had this crazy run up. And then I remind myself that we are sat in 2020. You only have to turn on the news to see what's going on in the world, and you can still buy 10,491 sats for $1. To me, that sounds like the deal of the century. If you're in the UK and you're looking to buy, even if it is as little as £1 a day, £1 a week, you can jump onto CoinFloor, the sponsors of this pod. I'll put the links in the show notes. In fact, if you click the link, it actually helps me out slightly. Click on there, and within probably an hour, you'll be buying your first sats. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so Danny, thank you very much for joining me today. Really nice to meet you. I've been wanting to get you on the show for some time now. As we just discussed off air, you're doing some pretty amazing stuff. For anyone who doesn't know you, Danny, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yep. Hi, Max. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate that. Yep, I'm Danny Scott, one of the founders of CoinCorner, UK Bitcoin exchange. Been around the space for quite some time now. CoinCorner was founded back in 2014, but I was involved quite a few years before that with mining and other various ventures along the way.
Okay, so mining, that's where you started, was it?
No, actually. The mining cropped up purely because we had no way of buying Bitcoin in the UK. So the way we actually eventually bought from, I think it was BitBargain at the time, was one of the only exchanges that was sort of UK focused. There was obviously the MT Gox and that side, but we wanted to try a UK one. We did end up buying from BitBargain in the end, myself and one of the co-founders at the time, but we figured that it was very difficult. Obviously, it was all bank transfers, and people are not used to doing bank transfers for on a website to buy something. And especially at the peer-to-peer level that it was with BitBargain. BitBargain works the same way as effectively local Bitcoins, if people are not aware of what that is.
BISC or local Bitcoin sort of model.
Yeah. So we realized that you could just obviously mine the Bitcoin and thought, okay, let's have a nosy into that. And we were both software developers and techies at the time, so we sort of went down that route eventually and led us onto the mining side, which then eventually led us back onto the exchange and the software side.
And what date was that?
It was probably so it was 2000. So first heard about it back in 2009 while I was at university. Got ignored for some time during that period, 2009-10.
You did, or Bitcoin?
Sorry?
You got ignored or Bitcoin?
I think both. For a few years there. But no, yeah, I heard about it in 2009. Then I kind of put that down while I was finishing my exams at university. Then went out into the real world, did a couple of years, another startup company. And during that time, that same startup company, I came across again Bitcoin a couple of times for various reasons, accepting it as payment methods as a competitive advantage. But eventually, that kind of led me on to actually, I know you're touching on the cashback, Bitcoin cashback. Weirdly enough, the Bitcoin cashback was actually the first Bitcoin project myself and one of the co-founders developed.
Oh, really?
And that must have been 2011 or 12 now. I can't quite remember what year that was, 11, 12-ish. So, but that was a slightly different spin. So rather than purchasing something, you go onto these cashback sites, you click a link through to PC World, you buy a PC, you get £20 back in Bitcoin. What we look to do is to say you've spent £200 on a computer, you pay that, get the £20 back in Bitcoin. Rather than do it that way, we wanted to do it in a different manner. So it was, rather than get the £20 back, you could be in with a chance to get the £200 back. So you'd get the PC for free. So we did it almost like a raffle. So once 20. So once 10 people had come along and spent £200 worth, we would then put them 10 people into a raffle, and then one of them 10 people would gain the £200, and the other guys would get nothing.
Okay.
So rather than take the small amount of cash back, you were able to then take the gamble of getting the full amount back. Now the key word there was gamble,
Yeah.
because it effectively becomes a lottery of sort. And we spoke to a lawyer that we knew here on the Isle of Man, and we kind of went through a few things with him and explained what we was doing. We did this originally without Bitcoin, so we just did this as a cashback scheme in the UK. So it was nothing to do with Bitcoin at the time. And then obviously through the conversations with a lawyer, we realized that we couldn't do that because it's gambling. Mm-hmm. So we said, actually, could we give them Bitcoin because it's not a currency, it wasn't classed as anything. And we tried to then explain what Bitcoin was to the lawyer and go down that route, which was fine. He got it great, which was good. But because there was no guidance in any sort of laws out there, regulations to encompass Bitcoin in any way whatsoever, it was just a massive grey area. And the honest answer from him was, he didn't know. And if we were to go ahead with it, we'd need to make sure we had a proper legal opinion, but he'd struggle to give the opinion and so on.
Right.
So it came to a point where we would have needed a gambling license for that, at which point we kind of put the thing down a little bit and didn't move forward with it, and moved on to what eventually was then the mining side.
Yeah, I can see, I mean, even now, the regulations are sort of, you have a great idea and it's always the regulation that gets in the way of actually doing that thing. And I can only imagine what it was like back then. It must have been much harder.
Yeah, it is a shame. I think that the regulations, it's not just our industry, it's every industry. It's just they clamp down slowly over time, closing, I don't say loopholes, but various loopholes and various ways of operating. So I know we're here in the Isle of Man, and we have quite a big gaming industry here, and the regulators over time have just got kind of worse and worse and worse on the gaming companies, and that's there's genuine reasons for what they're doing there. I'm not saying they're doing anything incorrect, but it does unfortunately over time build that forces companies to, or it stifles their innovation of the companies and able to change and operate in the way that they want to operate. So yeah, the regulations really have. We've seen that on our doorstep effectively for all these gaming companies. So we've seen that firsthand, which is kind of good. It gives us a little bit of a heads up of what we would potentially expect to come in the future for Bitcoin companies and like ourselves and others around the world.
So at that point you said, okay, right, this is going to be too much of a nightmare with the regulation and getting a gaming license. So you started mining. And back then, was that GPU or CPU or was that ASICs or what were you?
GPU at the time. So that was, started off with the GPU side. The ASICs quickly came around. That must have been like 2012-ish. Can't quite remember the exact times. At that point, we carried on with the GPUs because we couldn't get access to the ASICs. I don't know if you remember that's a throwback actually. The old, with the USB miners. I don't know if you remember
the little Bitmain ones.
Yeah.
I've seen them. I've never seen one up close, but I have seen them online.
Yeah, so we were looking at getting some of them, but we couldn't, for some reason. I can't remember why we couldn't end up actually getting any of them eventually. They did become much simpler to buy as the years went on. But yeah, I remember trying to get the USB miners, which we couldn't get. So yeah, what we did is we then turned the focus just to mining altcoins with the GPUs and carried on with the mining farm that way. But we started off with the GPUs in a co-founder's garage, which is a typical tech startup. Working in there, developing software, and then mining away. It became to a point where we ended up with, we started off, I think, with three computers, 3 PCs that we'd built and bought to mine Bitcoin with. And then we slowly built that up over time. And we got to a point where the garage was just too hot in there. So we moved out and got an office in the end. And then as we kept adding to the computers in the garage, unfortunately, this was running off his house electrics. So we blew the electrics a number of times and eventually had to move out of the garage, and we got a little warehouse and we started building up and increasing the miners and increasing the GPUs in a warehouse. And I do have quite a few pictures actually, or I've got a couple of pictures from back in the day I can send across afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great.
leave in the show's notes, which is it's quite a cool picture of all our GPUs we had set up. But yeah,
That's amazing. And I imagine back then, I mean, people look at anyone who's involved in Bitcoin, or most people involved in Bitcoin, as a bit crazy now. What was it like then when you're trying to explain to people what you were doing? How did that go?
A lot of the time it was like, you're just creating money out of thin air. It's like it literally was. You were just printing money, which it kind of was. You are printing money effectively. So yeah, the conversations were. It was all around explaining what Bitcoin is and how it works, and then mining always is the one that pops up. And when we tell them we're mining, you're showing them the pictures, and it was very difficult for people to get their heads around.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the banks was probably the most difficult one. It was actually luckily due to the mining side of things, we ended up with a banking relationship to allow us to launch the exchange later on down the line. But we first went to a bank here in the Isle of Man, or an intermediary as such, and we was talking to them because none of the high street banks just would not, especially UK. They still won't touch us in the UK. So we ended up having to explain. We did luckily get a guy who worked for one of the kind of banks here. When we say an intermediary, it's almost like a middleman between ourselves, a financial institute between ourselves and the actual banks. So they have underlying banks and they operate client accounts almost within their banking system. So it allowed us to have access to the UK banking system, but through a company that oversaw us effectively. So the underlying banks, which was HSBC and Lloyds at the time, they were comfortable with it to some extent. So we ended up getting a good relationship there, and we was explaining to them, what Bitcoin is, how what we're doing is mining it and creating it, and then we're just selling the Bitcoin to wherever we can. And the money was just the proceeds of mining. So they were actually okay with that and quite comfortable, which was not so bad. And it went okay for a few years doing that, which was good. But we then led on to, sorry, jump in here if I'm going off on a tangent to the questions you want to ask as well.
No, that's good. That's good.
Good. So we then went off onto another concept, which was crypto by post, which was effectively we were mining Bitcoins and we had Bitcoins. We were then looking to sell them, so we could either go and sell them on BitBargain or on an exchange somewhere. Mm-hmm. So we figured, why not try and sell them to the public rather than, so we created a website to sell them to the public. Mm-hmm. Problem with that is obviously we're then becoming an exchange, and the banks wouldn't give you a bank account. We wanted to do it in a simplified manner as well, so we could have a customer just come onto the website, buy with their debit card or credit card, and as they would do on like Amazon, for example. The problem with that is, as soon as we started talking to the card processors, they were realizing our customers were purchasing a digital product, and there was no proof of delivery of that product as such. Even though I know you can see that on the blockchain, but explaining that to any of these was just impossible. It just didn't happen. So we ended up with an idea of crypto by post, which was we physically we had some little USB sticks, and we put the Bitcoin wallet onto the USB stick, and we'd post it out physically to them. So we got a card processor that was actually eventually comfortable with us doing that because we were physically delivering a product. Mm-hmm. So we'd send out the USB stick. Once the customer received it, we know the Bitcoin address, and we topped the wallet up effectively with that Bitcoin. So they could then move it and do what they want to do with it.
So you actually you would have to wait until they had delivery, and then they would contact you, and you then send it to that address.
Yeah. Like so that. in the post we had I'm trying to think of the process exactly now. We had a code that we'd post out to them with the USB stick, so then they could come back on the website, enter the code, so we would know that they've received the product, and then we'd auto trigger off the Bitcoin to go into the wallet that was associated with that card and that code. So their wallet would then be auto topped up effectively. Obviously, it's absolutely dreadful from a privacy and a security perspective. Yeah. But back then, it was kind of like, it was an option. It was something that people did actually buy, and it was kind of worth it to some extent.
It sounded like a good one. I wish I knew about something like that back then, because for people who are not that techie, the ease of having something physically delivered and typing in the code, I know it's terrible for privacy, but back then no one was thinking about it really, and
no.
It actually sounds like quite a cool business. So why did that stop?
I can't actually remember why we stopped that one. Actually, I think we kind of, because we was kind of mining and we was increasing the size of the mining at the farm at the time as such. We just kind of put that down because it was making more money on the mining side, but the crypto by post concept was more manual labor to actually deal with it and deal with all the orders and posting it out and so on. So it just slowly came to, I guess, a natural close and slowly phased out as we just focused on the mining side. But yeah, no sooner had we had done that though. Obviously, the mining side, as more and more ASICs became into the market, it was been 2013, 14 sort of time. I think the ASICs became, was it early 2014, I think, when the ASICs came around for script-based coins, so all the altcoins effectively, so Litecoin and Dogecoin and all them sort of ones. And as soon as that hit, the GPUs that we actually had, even though we'd kind of moved off Bitcoin, then onto the altcoins, even at that point, the altcoins mining on GPUs became pointless, and there was just no point in it. The cost from UK electric, as you'll probably know yourself, is a lot more expensive than China or US or Iceland or wherever. So yeah, unfortunately, we did scale that up, and very quickly it kind of hit the point of losses due to the electric costs, and we had to turn that off as well.
And so that left you with a load of kit that, what did you do? Sell it for gaming or something like that?
We did, yeah, exactly that. Right. Yeah, eBay for all the graphics, because the graphics cards, some of them have obviously been had been extensively used over the time, but some of them were fairly brand new. We ordered them. We actually ordered them. That's something I've completely forgotten. Thinking back myself now, I'm remembering things that I forget we actually did, because we was buying from was it scan.co.uk, and because they actually accept Bitcoin, so we was mining the Bitcoin, and then we was using that to buy more graphics cards and more computer parts. So we kept cycling it around, which was actually quite a nice loop that we had going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, we had a lot to go through of graphics cards and power supplies and basically all the hardware that we could recycle, which I think that must have took us about 3 to 6 months, I think it was, over time on eBay, just to get rid of it all and sell it on.
Yeah, I bet.
Sorry. So yeah, just during that time period, obviously we took a strategic approach or strategic decision that we knew the industry fairly well, or we'd started to get into the industry fairly well. We were all interested in it. We all sort of saw the benefits and the potential in Bitcoin, and we didn't want to come out of the industry. So we decided, what's the next option to carry on with? Obviously, very entrepreneurial from the co-founders side of things, and we were just looking at what's the next best option from after mining. It's just not feasible anymore in the UK, so we turned our focus to the exchange side of things. So creating a website, which was mine and co-founders' bread and butter, because we were both software developers, and we already built quite a few things over the time anyway, just in terms of little projects we're building along the way. As we mentioned there, crypto by post and other various projects we're building. So we kind of pulled that together fairly quickly. Launched CoinCorner in July 2014, I think it was. So yeah, just 6 years old this month, which is good.
That's quite a long time in this industry, really. 6 years is some good going. And then what was it like setting that up? Was that, I assume, a similar problems with regulations and banks and all the people who want to get in your way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 6 years is a long time for us, I think, and it feels like a lot longer as well. I think the pace this industry moves at, it's unbelievable. But yeah, we had exactly the same issues that, as I mentioned there earlier, the banking piece. We luckily had the relationship from the mining, which eased the banking relationship to allow us to continue that relationship with them for the exchange, even though they knew it was a little bit more higher risk at that point. We did continue with that, which was good. It allowed us to actually launch in the UK. I think we were the first ones in the UK and the only ones in the UK to have UK banking under a correct business account, shall I say? Because I know there was quite a lot out there at the time still operating via their personal accounts, and I think you saw how the Mt. Gox situation turned out with that one as well, similar to that. Um, so yeah, we had the same issues. Regulation. Luckily, there was nothing around at the time, and we spent quite a lot of time with. We're based in the Isle of Man, so we fall under the Isle of Man's a funny jurisdiction. It's its own country to some extent, but it falls under Great Britain and it follows a lot of the UK guidance and law and so on. So we have our own FSA over here, the Financial Services Authority, as you guys in the UK have the FCA. So it's the equivalent of the FCA over here. So we ended up talking to them quite closely, getting to know them well. They realised an opportunity. One of the benefits, I think, of the Isle of Man, it's a small country and they can react and be nimble in terms of direction and industries they look to operate in. So they saw an opportunity with Bitcoin. They tried to grasp that early on, which was very good in terms of from their PR perspective. It was great from our perspective because we were here starting up. There was a couple of other small startups as well that were Bitcoin related here, starting to launch and come to sort of some fruition in 2014, mid to late. But then the big issue came when the Isle of Man started to get quite a lot of press about being I don't know if you remember, what year were you yourself when you came into the industry?
2017.
Right, okay.
So fairly new.
A couple of years before, so it was 2014, and the Isle of Man ended up being labelled as the blockchain island and Bitcoin island and things like that. I don't know if you saw that back in.
I did news. when I first came in. I remember seeing a lot of that sort of stuff, but I guess it'd been going on for a while.
Yeah, I think it was sort of mid to late 2014 when we first started to go through that sort of process, and the government here pushing heavily on that, which was, as I mentioned there, it was really good from our perspective. The downfall came for us, unfortunately. We had a conference in about September 2014, and at the time, because there'd been lots of press about the Isle of Man being a place to be for Bitcoin companies, the bank we were using, people then heard about the bank we was using, and they ended up getting a lot of applications in to apply for basically a bank account for the UK, because banking globally was still a nightmare. It was chaos. So they had, I think at the time, about 110 applications on their desk for bank accounts from businesses all around the world. Literally everybody turned up to this conference in mid-September. They were all turning up for the conference because obviously it was the place to be, but then they were also turning up to get the bank accounts opened and get that moving. The night before the conference, I got a phone call off the bank, our sort of account manager there, and he was saying, unfortunately, HSBC had already pulled the plug earlier, a couple of months before, and then Lloyd's was the sort of backup one, so we'd fell onto them, and then Lloyd's pulled the plug the night before the conference. So that was absolutely chaos. We was kind of like, what do we do? Because we're trying to sort our own banking out, but then we've got this conference the next day. There's people from all around the world coming, and we were trying to juggle so many things with it. And the conference began. I think the opening speech at the conference was from one of the government guys here, and they were sort of saying, I'm sure everybody's heard now about the banking situation, and had to give everyone a heads up. That was literally the first line of the conference.
That went well then.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that absolutely just killed it for the Isle of Man. We at that point there, all of them businesses they were all looking to relocate here as well and open offices. That was, going back to BitPay and GoCoin. I don't know if you remember the guys, GoCoin, CoinFloor, obviously across here, and every Bitcoin business you can think of globally at the time, they were all here for that conference and for that bank account, which was a real shame, because if that would have continued and carried on, I'm sure there would be a lot of businesses here, and a lot more would have been attracted here as well.
Well, it would have been amazing for them to have all those businesses now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really would, and it wouldn't. There'd have been so many more created off the back of that here as well, because it just would have been a perfect hub as such for these companies to come to. And yeah, it was an unfortunate situation at the time, and it's left us effectively with ourselves pretty much as the only Bitcoin business here now,
really?
Which is a shame. Yeah.
And so, but
Um,
you managed to keep your relationship with the banks somehow then?
we didn't.
No.
We unfortunately, because as soon as Lloyd's shut that down, the intermediary one that we were working with, they were happy to continue, but they didn't have an underlying bank. A clearing bank
Right.
essentially was what you needed. So the clearing banks were just saying no, and we ended up having to go on them bank in Eastern Europe. We bounced there for
Estonia or something like that?
quite a few years. Yeah, you name it, we've been in there.
Right.
Slovakia, Slovenia, Estonia, Latvia.
Hmm.
Yeah, we've had accounts at pretty much everywhere you can think of, nearly. Um, that was, I guess, the time when we realised having the bank was the competitive advantage. If you can get a good bank with a good relationship in this industry, it became that competitive advantage.
That's a crazy place to be where Bitcoin businesses are heavily reliant on the banks that they should have already replaced.
Yeah,
It's a weird situation to be in.
it really is. It's ironic almost. It's just, yeah, it's unfortunate circumstances, but yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so it sounds like you went through it, and you stuck around. So what was next? What was next after that?
Um, we got the banking in Slovakia, I think that was at the time, and we ended up as well. Then in the probably October November time, we launched the um, purchasing Bitcoin with debit card, credit card with card, because there wasn't really anyone doing that again at the time.
Hmm.
I think when we did launch that, we maybe be second or third to launch that. I think. Um, that gave us a quite a good competitive advantage. Again, we actually got the banking relationship alongside the card relationship, the card processor. They were becoming a little bit more comfortable with it, and we had a little bit of history to go with it. And we, again, luckily, through contacts of us knowing the a person within that card processing company, effectively, that give us that comfort, or give them the comfort that they knew us and we weren't some criminals. Um, and that then allowed us to open up, and it really did convert, I think, a lot more customers. What we found when you're going on a website, people are so used to going onto Amazon and to eBay, and you go on and you buy a product and you pay with your card, or your credit card, debit card, whichever one, and you don't really do bank transfers. It's not really a thing in other industries.
Hmm.
So to go on a website and actually do a bank transfer, it's alien to people.
Yeah.
So we wanted to pull that back to be a little bit more sort of user friendly, and create the whole process as somebody would do going buying a product on Amazon.
Mm.
And it did work. All of a sudden, we began to gain more customers. The signups were obviously increasing slowly as time went on, but the conversion rate as well of them customers was starting to increase from the early days, because it was just simpler for people to do. It came with extra fees, of course, because there's always the card fees and so on, but it was just more what they were used to. So we kind of went heavily down then the more, rather than, we initially launched more of trying to be a trading focused exchange, but then we slowly moved that to more of a retail focused exchange. So just the easy onboarding, which was, the card was just the key thing to bring that into place.
Yeah, it was sort of,
Um,
it's so uncomfortable for people first coming in anyway that must have made quite a big difference. Just not having to do the transfers and doing something they're used to
yeah,
stops it being so alien.
yeah, completely. It really did. So yeah, we went through that side of the process, and um, I think it was probably around that time then we got our first investment. So originally we've been self-funded from the start, and it was probably about 10 months in or something before we took on some investment, and that was just from a local high net worth individual. Took a very small investment at that time there, allowed us to continue and keep growing. And we've since then we've never actually took any more investment since that day, which has been great for us as a company, because obviously it means
Mm.
we're in control and we can control our own destiny as such. And one of the things I do always try and explain to people about growing with the industry rather than growing or trying to force the industry as such. We've seen a lot in the past where companies have tried to force something that's not quite, the industry's not quite ready for it. And we've seen, I don't know if you remember a
Payments
company
and
called, exactly, yeah, the payment side of it is the big one. BitPay obviously forcing
Yeah.
SegWit and not trying to force SegWit. They were fighting against it and they wanted the bigger blocks because it went with their business model. But the industry didn't want that at the end of the day, so they were trying to force something just because their business model suited it, but it wasn't best for Bitcoin and the industry. I don't know if you remember BitNet back in the day.
No,
that was
I don't.
2015, maybe, I think.
Right. Okay.
So they were similar. They were another payment processor. They raised, I think it was like $15 million from Rakuten, which is the sort of Japanese Amazon. And they went at this. We knew some of the guys there. They were great guys, and they were trying to effectively encourage and increase Bitcoin adoption for payments on websites. They actually did get Rakuten on board because that was part of the investment, which was good. So they did initially go with Rakuten, and that was their launch, their first merchant, really.
That's quite a big one.
Which is incredible, incredible first merchant. But luckily they were the investors, so it kind of worked for them.
Yeah.
But what they had a plan with, from what I remember, they had, say, a list of about 300 merchants, but they were big, high end merchants, so like your Rakutens and things. And they were trying to approach them and get them on board with Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I think it probably only took them about 18 months, and they realized that the world wasn't ready for the industry and wasn't ready for Bitcoin, and it's still too early days. And I think obviously they burned through the 15 million they raised, and they closed down about 18 months after that.
Yeah.
And that was a big eye opener to us along the way there, to realize that you can't force an industry like this. It's an unfortunate position to be in, I think, to some extent. And when you're talking, so we spent a lot of time talking to venture capitalists, and the US, they're used to throwing hundreds of millions at ideas and concepts and things, but in the UK they're a little bit more hesitant, I guess, to do that, and they kind of follow the lead of the US a lot of the time, in terms of Silicon Valley-esque style. So when you're talking to the UK ones and you're trying to explain to them that, okay, you need to raise a few million pounds, but actually that's to see you out for the next 5 to 10 years, or sort of long tail or long term plan. They kind of look at that, and that's not what they're after. They're after quick in, quick out, and they're flipping companies and selling the companies. And they want to grow quickly, grow fast, sell the company. It just didn't match with our industry, and that's just not what our industry did. And I think there was a lot of companies that we've seen throw lots of money at things, just didn't work, bad timing. It's no disrespect to the guys that did that, or the companies and the products or anything. It was just all about timing, and it just didn't work.
But it sounds like being nimble has definitely helped, because, like you say, you can make the decisions, and it does seem that you sort of never know what's around the corner with this industry, and things do change so quickly that if you've plowed a load of money into just marketing something as a payments provider, and then you have to pivot because that's no longer what people want, or you realize it's not ready, then it's not very easy when you've got all those people backing it. They're going to say, well, hold on, you can't change it now. So it sounds like it's kind of worked in your favor.
Yeah, I think it has. I don't know if it's lucky or good timing or well planned. It's definitely not well
planned. Go with well planned, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just a little bit lucky and good. Say good timing, bad timing, whichever one. It's sort of worked in our favor.
Yeah.
We've been able to grow with the industry, and I guess over that time we then sort of became fortunate enough not to have to need to go and take investment or chase investment, and that was such a time-consuming process, as well as other people that have gone and done the same. I'm sure they'll tell you and realize. Two of the big takeaways from ever going and seeing venture VC companies is it's so time-consuming, and everybody will always tell you, don't take that VC money unless you really have to, because you lose control of the company, you lose control of the way it's the direction it's going, the way it's ran, and that's not because the VCs are evil or anything like that, but their job is to make money. It's to invest money in a company, grow it, sell it on, and that's literally their job. So it's just the way it works.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so at this point, then you're running basically as an exchange, and you've got some investment, but just from one high net worth individual. And
Yep.
and then what was next for you?
Next, I lost my personal account, personal bank account.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
That was yeah, although it was all fun and games, that one. That was it was kind of one of them where it was almost a compliment from. So I had a bank account with HSBC,
Yeah.
and I'd had that for like 15 years, I think it was, since I was a kid, and I got a letter in the post from them, just basically saying your account's being closed.
Right.
You basically need to empty the account and like pay any cards or loans or anything I had with them. Luckily, I had nothing with them, and it was just cash in the account. So I rang them up, and they couldn't get anything out of them on the phone. I went into the branch, local HSBC branch, and I was sort of querying it, and the guy was sat there with me, and he was going through it, and he was like, "I don't understand why it's been closed," and all this side of it, going through round in circles.
You're
He
thinking,
eventually
I
said,
do.
yeah, well, literally that was what I was doing. I was sat there, and I knew full well why it was being closed. And he eventually then said, "Let me just go and talk to like the compliance team, the back office." So he disappeared for about 15 minutes, left me sat there for about 15 minutes. Eventually come back out, and you could tell on his face as soon as he came out, it was like he didn't know what to say and how to say it. And he said, "Yeah, unfortunately, it's come from the HQ in London, which means that they don't get, or this is what he told me, they don't get a reason as to why it's been closed.
Right.
It's just because they've said so in London HQ, and that's as far as it goes." So he couldn't do anything more for me. So I said, like, I sort of looked at him and I was like, "I know why it's been closed, but just wanting you to confirm." And he obviously was uh, tentative to say anything, and he ended up his quote. I eventually just dropped in, "It's because of my link to Bitcoin," and then his face kind of told the story at that point,
Right.
and give that away. And then eventually the conversation kind of finished on, if my circumstances change in the future, they'd love to have me back as a customer. So I was like, okay,
Wow.
thanks, and see you later. So
Wow.
yeah, it was kind of a compliment, I guess, to some extent, that we were on their radar, which
Hmm.
was interesting. But at the same time, it was, that was a little bit the first time maybe it got a little bit real personally for me, because we'd lost our accounts previously with the business bank accounts, which was fine, but
Hmm.
losing it on my personal account, which I don't think I'd ever bought Bitcoins through that account either, which was interesting. They'd obviously picked me up from wherever.
Yeah.
So it was just, yeah, it was the first time, I guess, it got real personally for me, I think. And it kind of woke me up to realization of why Bitcoin is potentially a really powerful tool.
And so when they're doing this, I mean, what's your thoughts on, are they doing this because they're not sure about Bitcoin, they don't understand it, it scares them, they think it's linked to criminal behavior, blah, 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 and they close it down? Or do you think at this point they know full well this is something that's competing with us? We do not want this system to survive. We do not want anyone who's linked to it to survive. So let's just cut everything off, or not sure.
I think at the time it was kind of like, it was I guess the emotion gets the better of you at the time. It's like they're seeing us as a competitor, and that's
Hmm.
why they're doing this. And you go down that route. But I think when you take a step back and think about it, think about what we have to do from an AML perspective, from our compliance team, it becomes unfortunately the regulatory burden comes in from the compliance side, and it becomes part of running a financial business. And I think it was a combination of potentially everything. Of yeah, they didn't understand Bitcoin for one. They saw I had some form of relationship and I was running a Bitcoin exchange. They didn't want that risk. I wasn't worth it to them. Maybe if I had a massive mortgage with them where I was paying them lots of interest and they were getting good income from me, then maybe I'd be worth it to them and they'd continue to keep me as a customer. Because I had nothing through them except just a standard bank account. They didn't see it worth it that I was the extra burden and overhead to keep an eye on me, that it just wasn't worth the admin costs. So I think it was a little bit of everything, really. And I think they do see Bitcoin as, whether they see it as a threat or whether they see it as still unsure how they fit that into their business model, and how they can use that in their business. I think all the banks are slowly attempting to figure that out to some extent. So yeah, a combination, I would say, of a little bit of everything. I'd say no hard feelings, but I always first to slag HSBC off at any opportunity I get, I'm sure. But
we all should.
um,
We all should. I wouldn't be taking that offer back if they want you to open the account again.
no, I don't think I'll take that.
Yeah, leave that one on the table. So that was what, 2016? Did you say?
Yeah, I think that was 2016. About that time. I think that was roughly around 2015. We were starting to expand the team a little bit. 2016, again, we was expanding the team a little bit more at that point, and that was sorry.
No, I was just going to say what sort of how many were you? Was it just you and a couple of mates, or was it getting quite big at that point? What was the team?
Yeah, no, we were still tiny. There was there 3, 4, 5, 6 of us maybe. I think about 6 of us at the time. So yeah, we were still a very small team. Growing again with the industry and taking it slow. We weren't running away with millions of customers or anything like that. It was a slow and steady pace, really. We spent a lot of that time as well working with the FSA over here, the Financial Authority, and we were helping them create what eventually became designated business. We didn't help create, the designated business. We helped create the Bitcoin piece that fell under the designated business status. Okay. So designated business status here in the Isle of Man is helps encompass companies that don't quite fall under any regulation to some extent, but they need to have some sort of oversight. So it meant that we were then overseen for anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing side of things.
Right.
So we were, I think it was a shame because the Isle of Man, this was still off the back of them trying to push the island as a good place to come and relocate your Bitcoin business. So they were pushing to get this regulation through as quick as they could as well at the same time as we were, because we, I'll say, maybe naively thought that we may get a bank, a UK bank or UK banking relationship off the back of having some regulation over us. I think Bitstamp, beat us to it with their Luxembourg. I think they got a Luxembourg license about 2 weeks before we fell under the Designated Business Act. So I think we would have been one of the first companies in the world to fall under any formal regulation for a Bitcoin business. So it was quite an exciting time for us at that point, and it was good. So yeah, we kind of moved forward with that. Unfortunately, that again, the naivety side of it, we didn't really. It made no difference to the UK banking side of things, because they didn't see it as anything interesting. It was just another. We weren't regulated; we were just overseen by the regulator. So it was all wording of how we fell under it. Unfortunately, the banks here in the Isle of Man, they're just branches of UK banks, so they all effectively have their licenses all through the UK. So all of the decision making came from London still, and the London branch didn't see us under the Isle of Man's Designated Business Act as a regulated entity. So they had no, they basically had no movement whatsoever on opening up banking to us at any point.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, we still stumbled with that, and it was still a struggle for the next couple of years. It was really only until, was it 2019, I think, the UK banking eased up. So it was only just over a year ago now when we've actually gained access to UK banking. So all this time, for the first 5 years of the business, we were operating on Eastern European banks, as I mentioned, Hong Kong banks, and just everything.
It's crazy how much you have to go through to just supply a service for someone to buy something they want to buy.
Yeah, it really is. It's it's incredible. I guess that wouldn't put me off running another sort of starting another business or anything, but it really does make you realize how maybe I've been unfortunate in the industry we picked to start a business up in.
I think definitely, yeah.
And go through the pain we have along the way, but it's taught us a lot, which is the positive thing I always take away from all this is the amount we've learned as a team here, and the amount I've learned throughout the whole process. It's incredible way to learn running a business, and I think if any of our team, if we were to go into other industries, into another business, you'd think differently, I think, about how you run it and how competitive advantages can be found and things like that. So I think it's such a good learning experience in this space. You do have to just think outside of the box for so many things.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said to you just before we jumped on the call, it looks like you're thinking outside the box now, still very much so. And so the things that I'd mentioned were you're doing the CoinCorner checkout, which I want to jump onto in a minute, and also this earning Bitcoin Sats back reward. So it looks like you're branching out and meeting the needs that definitely are there, because the Sats back is something everyone I speak to is like, yeah, that's brilliant. That's such a cool thing. Like, people
Good.
who don't necessarily want to buy, if I'm trying to explain to someone, I'm like, yeah, you've got to go and buy this thing, and they don't really understand it. They're like, maybe I won't bother. But if I'm like, you can go and spend money on something you're already going to spend money on, and you get this thing for free that I'm
Yeah.
telling you is brilliant, they're more likely to they're more likely to try that, definitely. And the
Yeah.
checkout, that's something I'm going through myself at the moment, like trying to sell some of my art on my website, and I'm trying to mess around with BTC Pay server and all this stuff. But actually having the option, it looks like you sort of take away some of the stresses for people. Is
Yeah.
really cool. So how did you land on those two ideas?
Yep, thank you. We were actually looking through your website earlier on today. Some of the team checking out your artwork,
Oh,
and so
really?
you've got some fans in the team here of your artwork, which
Oh,
is good.
that's nice to hear. Thank you.
But yeah, so the checkout we launched with the checkout originally at the very start back in 2014, and that was the thing again about keeping an eye on spotting the timing. It was far too early. We launched with a couple of local shops here actually physically accepting Bitcoin. When the conference was on, one of the pubs here, we got accepting Bitcoin, and everybody was. It was incredible after the conference. It was
Awesome.
like everybody was back to this tiny little pub in the Alaman, and they were accepting Bitcoin for everything. So say you had like the likes of Max Kaiser and Roger Ver, Brock Pierce,
Yeah.
all of them people. That was literally the whole industry in this pub paying with our gateway
So
to
it'd have been
buy the.
quiet drink then with Max Kaiser.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great character.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really good, but unfortunately, again, it all came back to the UK banking piece, and as soon as we lost the UK banking piece, it kind of kills allowing us to be able to operate with a lot of these UK businesses. As soon as you say to a UK business as well, yeah, you can start accepting Bitcoin, but you're gonna have to receive your payouts for GBP via an international bank transfer, and it costs this much, and so on, so on.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of killed the product. So we pulled the plug on that pretty much at the end of September, I think it was, and we didn't revisit the checkout piece until it's roughly about a year ago. We introduced it again, or we started to introduce it again and bring that back. We didn't really. That was really the time when we started to develop it and bring the product back to life effectively. And it wasn't until really the start of this year that we've properly launched it and started to move forwards with trying to entice, I guess, bring more businesses on to accept Bitcoin. And as you mentioned there, with the the ease of what we've done, it's effectively the same way as BitPay work, and it allows any merchants to just pull in a plugin. For example, if you're using a platform like Magento or WooCommerce,
Yeah.
something along those lines, you could be able to download a plugin from us, install the plugin on your website, sign up on our website as well for your account, throw your API keys in, and off you go, and you're accepting Bitcoin. As soon as the Bitcoin customer buys something on your website, pays with Bitcoin, we're flipping that to GBP or Euro, depending on what you want. And then we've also got like auto bank withdrawals. So as soon as your balance reaches, say, £500, we'll auto withdraw that to your bank account via UK faster payments. So it's quite seamless, and there's very little fees because we give the bank transfer for free, obviously, to withdraw your money. And then we just charge a 1% flat fee for the conversion of the Bitcoin to sterling or to euros.
And what if someone, sorry to cut you off there, what if someone doesn't want to go back into dirty fiat? What if they want to keep their
Yep.
Bitcoin? Can you do the same thing for them, or?
Yep, that just works exactly the same. There's just a setting in your user area where you can just flag it, say don't convert anything, so you can just hold it in Bitcoin.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the way that we all want the world to work and
Yeah.
everybody to accept. And I know you get the very much the Bitcoin maximalist hardcore side, which will be like, if they're not really accepting Bitcoin, if they're taking Bitcoin and selling it for GBP straight away. But unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. And people that are, or companies, not even people, it's companies that are brand new to Bitcoin. You can't turn around to them and say you've got to hold Bitcoin, because it's not just a case of you have to kind of think in their mindset as well, and where they're coming from a business, because these businesses, for one, people just think, oh, well, the Bitcoin volatility is the issue there. And if the price goes down, then they're going to lose the money if they need to buy their supplies of whatever they're selling. It's unfortunately, it's not even just that issue. There's lots of knock-on effects of things like, the accountancy side is one of the big things that you come across. These businesses they may have a local accountant in Manchester somewhere, and that accountant has never used Bitcoin and never created accounts with Bitcoin in there as a currency, and it creates complexity that these guys are not ready for and are not able to do yet. So unfortunately, I think the world is going to take some time moving sort of over to that side of things, and it naturally will be. They'll accept Bitcoin, but they'll flip it straight away for sterling, so their accountant can just see sterling and deal with it. And they still need to buy supplies still as well. I know people say, well, why not tell them to tell their supplier to accept Bitcoin, and it's like becomes a nice circle. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, and the way it can be. So you have to have services like ourselves to bridge that gap initially, and then over time, hopefully, they can all stop converting to sterling, and they'll be able to just use Bitcoin. But that will take time.
It's a very small percentage of people who will be in that circular economy and just want to hold the Bitcoin. It's whatever it is, even if it's 1% of people or something like that. So it's really good to have the option for people to accept it and dip their toes in, and then maybe they go down that maximalist route and want to keep everything in Bitcoin down the line. So it's a good way to get people in anyway.
Yeah, it is.
And for the ones who are keeping it in Bitcoin, that 1%, can that then, I assume, be linked to their hardware wallet or something and generate new addresses each time, or do they have static addresses, or how does that work?
So when the checkout, when the customer wants to pay with Bitcoin, that'll generate a new address every time, and they'll pay for the order. Once the Bitcoin hits your account, at the minute we don't actually have an auto withdrawal, but that's something we should be bringing in shortly. Where if you wanted to auto withdraw your Bitcoin out to say your Trezor or your Ledger you've got stored elsewhere, then you'll be able to set that up, and we'll just auto withdraw when you hit a certain threshold. So yeah, that'll all be working fine. It's just the same as any other exchange. You can just withdraw to where you need to.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. I will. I'm trying to get lots of other artists and people who are just doing not big businesses, but just doing smaller volume stuff. And that sounds like for some of them it could be useful. So I'll put the word out.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Yep. If you need to say, if you're trying to do it for your website as well, feel free to. They can drop me a message after the podcast, and we can try and help you set up and sort something out for you there.
Thank you. It may come to that. My goal is to try and set up BTC Pay server and do it all myself, so that I know what I'm doing. But I am not brilliant at this sort of stuff. So if in a couple of months I don't manage it, I might come crying and just say, help me.
That's fine. No, that's good. I mean, that's good to hear. I know that's, we want people to come and use us as a business and everything else, but you using the BTC Pay server, that's better to hear that you're able to do that, or hopefully able to do that by the end of it, and accepting Bitcoin and holding it then, which is, that's what I want. That's what I want more people to be doing. We are, as a company, just that bridge at the minute for companies that don't want to do that. So yeah, that's good to hear.
And so the other one, the Satsback, that is something I definitely want to use. That's something that I think is brilliant, and I know that lots of people will be interested in that. So can you talk me through how that works? How would someone go from now? I don't have anything to do with your business. I've never used it before, but I want to get some Satsback. What do I do?
Yep. So sign up at CoinCorner. You will then, there's an earn Bitcoin section. So you pop into there, and on that page you can look for any merchants in the UK. We're predominantly UK focused at the minute, so we have I think it's just over about 750 merchants now in the UK. You will say you're looking to buy a PC, going back to the example I mentioned earlier. PC World are on there, for example. You will click on PC World, takes you through to their website. That effectively puts a cookie on your machine to say you've clicked through from CoinCorner. Once you then buy the product at PC World, you will then get an email from us to say it's registered for Satsback at some point. once you've received your product. So sometimes there'll be a little bit of delay in dependent on the merchant, because you've got to wait for your product to be delivered, and make sure you also, you don't return the product and then try and get the sats back as well, because obviously
that's what I was going to try as well. You've closed that gap.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the merchant's already closed that gap for us. So unfortunately not possible. I think you'd be surprised how many people I think attempts that as well. I know from years back when I was involved in the cashback stuff, it's surprising. So once you've got that, it's all automated in the background there, that you've got nothing else to do. You'll get an email telling you sats back coming, and then once your Bitcoin are credited to your account, you'll get an email telling you that's been credited and how much it's for. So that's kind of the basic overview of it. What we've also introduced, I don't know how much you've seen of it yet, but we've also introduced a extension for your browser. So we've got a Chrome extension. It works in Edge and Opera and a couple of other ones as well. So you'll be able to add the extension to your browser. You'll be able to go browsing the internet. So say you're going and buying something from boots.com, for example, you then don't have to log back into your CoinCorner account and click through. You're able to then, it'll pop up with a little pop-up saying, Boots are a member of CoinCorner cashback. So then you'll just have to click the button on the pop-up that pops up, and it'll effectively put the cookie onto the Boots website. So you'll be able to get your cash back that way. So it means you don't have to go back to our website all the time searching for the company you're looking for.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, it's, I know, privacy conscious industry and everything else, and people are not too big of fans of extensions and plugins and things, but it will still, I think, hopefully suit a particular audience that do want that. And it effectively means as well, you don't miss if you forget about it, but actually you visit a website that we do have, and it'll just pop up and tell you. So it does work really well. So we have that.
Sorry, I keep jumping in over the top. What sort of percentage can people expect? I assume it varies from retailer to retailer, but
yeah, it does. It's I think the highest we go to is 35%, 32%. Getting told 32% from the side here. So yeah, that's 32% ish. It again massively varies and depends on the merchant. So some of them may be as small as like 2 or 3%, but they're potentially ones that you might buy, say for example, a holiday, and you might get 2 or 3% back on holiday. So it's a big value item, and it's a significant amount then. Some of them also will give you back rather than a percentage. Some of them may give you back like a fixed fee, £10, for example. So if you sign up for a subscription at Sky or whatever that be, you may get like £10 worth back. So there'll be fixed fees. One of the other interesting things which we have just launched today, we haven't told anybody about it yet or shouted about it.
Exclusive. We get all the big exclusives here.
So we've just added today to the website a product feed, so a product search effectively. So you can log into CoinCorner, where you normally see the merchants that you can look through to get the cash back on. We've added a new section for the products, so you can search if you're looking for a 32-inch TV, for example. You can just type in 32-inch TV. It'll bring you back all the 32-inch TVs we have in the product list, and it'll tell you which merchants they're from. So you can effectively click on the product, and it'll take you straight to the product on, say, PC World or wherever that is. So we've got, I think it's about 6.5 million products, I think, in there on the 750 UK merchants we've got going. So that'll be quite a good one. As far as I'm aware, there's nobody else out there in our industry that does this. I know there is in the cashback world with Quidco and Top Cashback and the likes in the UK. And there's a couple of them that do product searches, but in the Bitcoin industry at the minute, I think we'll be the first ones to do that. So excited to launch that and start shouting about that this week.
Brilliant. And that goes live when? Today, did you say?
It's live now, yeah. We've pushed it live today. We just haven't told the customers about it just yet. So
for anyone who's listening and wants to check it out, will they just go on your website and it will be under just like a search bar, will it? Yeah,
it's just in the earn cashback section, and in there you've just got the merchant search and our product search as well alongside it.
Cool. Okay.
So yeah, it's actually very useful. It's something that I think the team here, as soon as we got the cashback thing, it was one of the things that the team here was like, I want to buy, a set of pans, but I don't know which merchants sell the set of pans. So how do I find the merchants that sell these pans? So it kind of led us naturally onto the product search. And we kind of got that together fairly quickly, which is good. So yeah, very useful feature, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. And so if someone goes on there, let's just say they've never bought Bitcoin before, they've never used it, and they sign up for this service and they start buying things. What happens with that Bitcoin? Does it go into, say, their account with you on the exchange, and then they
Yeah.
withdraw in a lump? Because I assume they don't want to be sending tiny amounts all the time.
No.
Unless, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, just go straight into their CoinCorner account and their wallet, and they can withdraw whenever they want. But yeah, you're not going to be able to. You may only get 50p back on one of your purchases, so you're not going to be wanting to withdraw that every time. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And so, is there anything else in the works that we haven't covered and should have?
I'm sure there's plenty, but my mind is absolutely frazzled.
I did see the Bitcoin Core contributions. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's quite a basic level, I will say. So we're not. I guess when I first started getting into the Bitcoin side of things, I'm a software developer by trade, so it was kind of I was always poking around and playing around with the code there. And myself and the co-founders at the time, going back years now, we just created our own version of Bitcoin. We basically took the code and did the same as what like Litecoin did, for example, and effectively cloned it, but created our own name and stuff. So we played around with it from very early on. And over the years, I've not had the time to basically come back and really do too much. I've always paid attention all the way through the whole SegWit. It's civil war, should we call it almost?
Yeah.
In terms of upgrading to SegWit and the scaling debates and all that side of things. So I've always paid attention and kept up to date with the technology and how it's adapting. But I've never had the opportunity to jump back in and contribute. So last year, it's about this time last year, actually, myself, I kind of wanted to get back into it, but I wanted to encourage the tech guys to start to get back into it or to get into it. So I kind of sat down with all our tech team and I was talking them all through it. And we spent probably the first 2 or 3 months where we had like a Friday morning where we spent about 2 or 3 hours every Friday morning kind of going through Bitcoin Core, explaining how all the process works and all the background stuff. And I was talking them through all that. I was learning at the same time myself throughout this process as well, because it was a really sort of great experience for me going through that. And the idea was to encourage the guys to start contributing themselves and start giving back to the community effectively in the industry. So we then, I think our first pull requests that actually eventually got committed were in October last year. And we went through the process, myself and 3 of the other tech guys now have all got contributions, which is great. So there's sort of 4 CoinCorner members, team members have all contributed to Bitcoin Core, which is, I guess, a great thing from our perspective. Just to, it's saying contributing to Bitcoin Core is an incredible achievement for the guys here, which was great.
Definitely.
But it's also to give back to the community. Now, our changes weren't significant, like signatures and Taproot-esque style changes. There was a lot of simple GUI changes, and there was a lot of grammar mistakes here, there, and everywhere that they still need dealing with and contributing to. So we took them as a good first issues to be able to look at and see how we can get into it. It's not just about the code side of things. I think with Bitcoin Core as well, there's a process. If you've not worked in open source software before in the past, there's a whole process that you end up having to go through. So while we were working through it ourselves, we were recording everything and tracking everything, and we ended up writing some tutorials for Windows development, Mac development, and we've done a Linux one as well. We haven't actually released that one. But what the idea was, we could create something here to show people through our first pull requests, and that would allow them to go off and hopefully encourage more new people to come into the industry. We found, Googling around, there was such a lack of walkthroughs. Like what we wanted was a walkthrough from step 1 all the way through to your pull request being committed to the code, to actually explain the whole process, every step along the way. And there was just really nothing out there. So what we did is we created that, and it showed you the whole process of how you do it, how you commit via GitHub, and every little step in between, and how then you communicate with the people that will be reviewing your code, and if they make changes, you've got to do rebasing and so on. There's lots of steps throughout it, and coming in, you might know C++, but you've never worked in open source code, you've never worked with GitHub and Git, you've never worked on Bitcoin, and it's that introductory piece. So a big part of that whole process was to try and create these documents and these tutorials to then give to other people and let other people follow them and hopefully create something themselves and start contributing themselves, so we can encourage more people into the space. So that was the aim. Hopefully some people have found it of use. We've had, coincidentally, actually this last week, I've actually had 2 people contacts they found the Windows guide that we released, and they were basically saying there's very little out there for Windows development with Bitcoin, and they wanted help on that, and they were asking us if we can kind of be their mentors and help guide them through Windows development on it. So it seems to have worked. We at least got 2 people there involved, which is good.
Well, that's brilliant.
Hopefully we've got more in the background that have quietly found it useful, but at least 2 have come forward and wanted some form of mentorship to get them through it. It was good. It was a good process, good experience for the guys. Hopefully the long term for us is we still want to carry on contributing, but when you're trying to build an exchange and run these other things, it's time consuming and difficult. But eventually our sort of aim, or I guess as a team, tech team, our goal is to kind of contribute something a bit more substantial, a little bit more, you see Taproot and Snore and things like that, maybe they're a little bit too big, but Erlay was another one, which is quite a cool little efficiency that's been created for Bitcoin Core, and I think that was developed by one person. So these are the sort of things that eventually as a team we want to come on to sort of find a little project that's a little bit more substantial to
is that
the
Erlay
code.
one to do with bandwidth or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Eastern European guy, I seem to remember listening to a podcast with him on there. It sounded like he was anyway. I can't remember the name now. But yeah, that's cool.
I can't remember his name either, but it is effectively that one. That was kind of the core contribution. We are as a team going to continue to contribute where we can, but it was all about trying to encourage and educate more people to come and get involved, because Bitcoin is not a company. Bitcoin is this open source decentralized project, and you need contributors. So it's nice to see the likes of Square and Kraken, I think Zappo as well. They've starting to now give out the grants for Bitcoin Core developers, which is really, really good to see. We've not been in the position yet to start giving out grants to people, but we're doing it as a team internally to add and contribute. So the more we can try and help educate, the more we can hopefully encourage more people to come in and get involved.
Definitely. Well, it sounds like from start to now has been a serious amount of work, and you've had your work cut out dealing with regulators and banks and all the other bullshit that went with it. And it's nice to hear that now you're working with Bitcoin Core and giving back. It sounds to me that you could have done lots of other things, and there might be a reason that you're here, and there's Bitcoin's more to you than just a business. So what does it mean to you? Why are you here through all the pain and suffering that you've gone through?
No idea. Glutton for punishment. I think early on it was it wasn't, to be honest. I know a lot of people say they come for the money, the price, and they stay for the tech, and there's the memes that go around with that sort of thing. But it was originally the tech that attracted us, I think, because we were techies maybe and developers at the time. I think early on I didn't realize what Bitcoin really was. And it was probably for the first couple of years, you didn't really realize the power of what Bitcoin is and how that can make an impact on the world. I think one of the things a lot of people sometimes bring up, back in the early days of the internet, or when the internet was first kind of being created, there was a payment protocol actually created, which was it 402, something like that, HTTP code 402, I think it is. And that was created for online payments, but there was no technology there available to actually fill the gap at the time. So Bitcoin that was one of the first times I realized, actually somebody had this envisioned the internet having some form of payment, and then you kind of think, okay, Bitcoin kind of actually does that, and it fills that gap. And then that was probably the earlier 2015-16 times when you start to realize that, and you think, okay, it's a payment, it's a peer-to-peer currency, and all that side of things. But then I think it came onto more the store of wealth, the investment, a remittance product, a decentralized base layer that can then be built on top of with various products like your Lightning and your Liquid with your side chains. One of the ones I really loved the concept of was the LTV Shop. The name thinks LTV Shop, which is one of the Lightning devs who has created a Lightning based. It's almost, I guess you class it as layer 3 sort of product, and it's a Lightning e-commerce website. So the website itself will have products on there. So it's, say you're going on Amazon, it looks just like Amazon. You buy a product, you go to the checkout. You don't need to create an account with the website, so they don't ever store your details on their database. You don't have to put your card details in because you're paying with Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
But when you make the payment with Lightning, you can attach details across in an invoice to Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make the Lightning payment in the invoice, you can attach your name and your address, your delivery address for the product.
Right.
So your delivery address and all your details and all the payment all go in this Lightning invoice across the Lightning network. The company at the other end receives that payment and receives your details. Yeah. They can post the product to you, and your personal details, your bank details, your card details, nothing ever gets stored anywhere. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
And it means,
what was it called?
I'm sure it's LTV Shop. I can find you the link afterwards, and I can send that over to you.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
It was really good little concept, and that was one of the first ones. Myself and Zach, one of the techies here, he was I think one of the first ones to buy something over it, which was we just bought some stickers. So I think that was about 8 months ago, something like 8-9 months ago. But it was one of the first ones where the more time goes on. So when what is Bitcoin to me, the more time goes on, it adapts and changes a little bit to what it is and what it can become. And I think it goes back to the internet days of the 90s. Someone said, what's the internet to you? You don't realize back in the 90s it was just a couple of websites that people were doing for a little bit of fun, and there was nothing really in it. Then e-commerce kind of came around, but then social media came around and smartphones came around and apps, and all of a sudden it evolves and it changes over time. But it's all been built on this base layer of the internet protocol. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is built on that protocol to some extent. And it wouldn't be able to be here without the internet in some respect. So I think it slowly changes over time, and it's given us something that's a truly decentralized base layer, I think is the best way I always describe it. And allowing us to build, people can use it the way they want. If they want to use it as currency, use it as currency, store of value, investment, remittance products. They want to use it to build cool Lightning shops on, then they can do that. It's there and it's available to everybody. So it's not one thing, it's lots of things to many people.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have any concerns, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's crazy to think that all these other layers can be built on top of Bitcoin, and that it can go more mainstream and can have massive amount of use, and that it can scale to that. I'm not a techie guy, but from what I understand, I think it can, and I'm really confident and excited about it. That's why I'm doing the podcast, because I truly think this is going to change the world, or has a potential to. Do you have anything that, as you are more technical, that you look at and you go, that concerns me slightly, or something where you're a little bit worried?
Yes and no, I guess. There's always little bits and bobs that pop up here, there, and everywhere. I always say, scaling perspective. The scaling on chain is always been a question, and always been that debatable of, is it right, is it wrong? And I hope the way we've done it at the minute, as when I say we, the Bitcoin community, keeping the block size small, and scaling cleverly, not scaling with throwing bigger blocks at it and just throwing mass at it, which is just not the way to scale in my eyes. And I think technically it doesn't really, it doesn't make sense to. It makes sense to build it the way it's been built. The base layer should stay as decentralized as possible, which means smaller blocks, and it means you build on the efficiencies, like we mentioned earlier on, where Erlay has created something there to improve on an efficiency of something that's already a feature within Bitcoin. And all the work that goes into Bitcoin Core really at the minute is all about creating the efficiencies on the base layer, which then gives the decentralized aspect sort of more strength, shall we say, and keeps it decentralized at the scale that we need to go to.
Mm-hmm.
The scaling side of things, I think, will come from the layer twos, which is Lightning and your side chains like Liquid.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the scalability for mass adoption, I think, will be the way to go. We've been using Lightning quite heavily recently. We've introduced that into our checkout as well, so you can use Lightning on the checkout now.
Right.
And it's incredible. It works. It's smooth. There's things in the background that we are ironing out, and there's things we've spotted in Lightning that we'd like changing and things. But it's 2.5 years old, Lightning, since it was on the live net. It's going to take time to adapt and evolve and change, but 2.5 years in, it's working great. I know there's a flood and loot attack which has been thrown around the media quite a bit at the minute. It's on my list to go and read more of the technicals about that and try and understand what that attack's all about, and is that an actual danger to Lightning? Now, in one respect, everyone keeps saying, yeah, it is. It can, effectively steal the funds of what's in the Lightning network. There's a $10 million locked up, I think, at the minute in the Lightning network. If it was really a threat, someone would go and steal that $10 million. So it's a theoretical threat. This is me talking on the surface of it. I've not delved into the detail yet, but there's always going to be, my kind of point that I'm getting to is there's always going to be threats throughout any piece of software, and that's the way it is. And there's never going to be a bulletproof piece of software as bulletproof as Bitcoin now is. Obviously, along the way there was hiccups and everything along the way, but no, I think the state we're in and the scale into mass adoption, I think, will have to be done on the layer 2, but still in a decentralized manner. And the base layer is all about building them efficiencies in now, which is the key piece to it, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, it's nice to hear that you're confident. As I say, as a non-techie, it's difficult for me to dig too deep into some of the stuff. I have to trust some people and let the people who understand this stuff do the digging. But it's exciting.
It's a shame. Yeah, it is. It's a shame. Obviously, I am techie, and I come from obviously 15 years of development background and so on. So I can delve in and jump into some of the techie pieces, but I don't get time a lot of the time to actually delve into the technical aspects and really understand it, to understand, are these things a threat? So even I myself have to take advice from certain people in the industry that, if Jimmy Song, for example, is a great sort of, he does pretty good technical analysis sometimes of certain things and tries to explain that to in layman's terms, which is great. And you, unfortunately, in this sort of industry, you do have to rely on that a little bit because it's so vast an industry and there's so much going on and so much moving. You do end up relying on other people to almost convert the real technicals into something simpler that we can understand. So I'm still in that exact same position as yourself, where even if I can understand it, I sometimes don't get the time to understand it, and you have to rely, as much as it's the don't trust, verify. Unfortunately, there comes a point where you do have to trust sometimes.
Yeah, you can't do it.
So you're not alone in that. Yeah, no, you're absolutely not alone in that. I think the rest of the industry is very much the same, and it sometimes obviously can work quite negative, where you've got the likes of Roger Ver and things like that with Bitcoin Cash, where they're shouting to everybody, Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, and it can scale because we've made bigger blocks and all this sort of stuff. But if somebody that doesn't know the technicals listens to him, they could buy into that.
That's the scary bit. And I mean, what I always say to people because loads of people who I've introduced to Bitcoin have asked me that question, and I just say, look at the market cap, and then listen to 20 people who are very knowledgeable about Bitcoin speak, and then 20 people who think they're knowledgeable about Bitcoin Cash speak, and then spot the idiot. And it generally, people will realize quite quickly that, wow, okay, this side, they've got some ridiculously smart people working on this and they understand what they're talking about, and the other side is just a lot of shouting and bullshit, and normally people work that out, thankfully.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And yeah, hopefully sometimes people may get burnt along the way, but generally they do work out and come to the come to the side, come to the dark side, but come to the side of realization. I think,
Yeah,
which is good. Yeah,
definitely. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for what you're doing and contributing to Bitcoin Core. And I'm going to be checking out this Sats back. And if in a couple of months I can't work out how to set up and take Bitcoin, I'll definitely be speaking to you about that as well. But can you just tell us where people can find you, and if you want to hear from anyone?
yep, yep. Thank you for having me on, Max. Appreciate it. And really enjoyed talking to you. So you can find me on Twitter, mainly CoinCorner Danny, and coincorner.com if you want to come and get cash back on Sats, and or looking to accept Bitcoin from a checkout, or if you want to just come and buy Bitcoin.
Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much. I'll be linking all of that in the show notes anyway. And everyone go and check out this search feature and go and buy some stuff and get some sats back.
Thank you,
All
Max.
right. Nice to speak to you. Cheers, Danny.
You too. Thank you.